Clara wiped sweat from her brow as she prepared a stew in the small settler kitchen, trying to ignore the aches in her arms and the lingering bruises from the previous night. She had come to the frontier seeking honest work, a place to start anew, but life had proven harsher than she imagined. The creaking of wooden floors and distant neighing of horses reminded her of the isolation she endured. Every chopping of vegetables felt heavier, yet she forced a smile, hoping no one would notice the pain she hid behind her calm exterior. The giant rancher, Tobias, entered the kitchen with the quiet authority of a man who had spent decades commanding the land. His sharp eyes immediately noticed the discoloration on Clara's arms, the faint marks barely concealed under her sleeves. Something inside him tightened, a protective instinct awakened by the injustice he sensed. He approached without a word, the tension in the air thick, making Clara's heart beat faster. She tried to brush it off, but Tobias's gaze penetrated deeper than any words could reach. Clara had always believed that endurance was strength. Surviving the harsh frontier, the long hours, and the occasional cruelty from townsfolk had been her only shield. But Tobias's presence made her feel exposed, seen in a way she had never allowed herself. His large hands, calloused yet careful, hovered near her without touching, assessing, reassuring. She realized then that help was available, not from the world she fled, but from someone who commanded it simply by existing. Days passed, and Tobias remained watchful. Every time Clara carried firewood, milked cows, or cooked for the ranch hands, he observed quietly, his stern expression softening just enough to reveal concern. The town whispered rumors about his temper, his immense size, and his dominance over the land. Yet, Clara discovered an unexpected kindness behind his formidable exterior. Each small act, extra bread, a word of caution, a quiet nod, began to knit a fragile trust between them. One afternoon, Clara's hands shook as she chopped onions, fresh tears stinging her eyes. Memories of cruel townsfolk and a world unwilling to see her struggle overwhelmed her. Tobias appeared silently, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. The warmth of his gesture startled her, breaking through her defenses. "You shouldn't carry all of it alone," he said, voice low but commanding. Clara nodded, overwhelmed by relief and confusion, sensing a bond forming that neither had anticipated. Rumors spread fast in the town, a giant rancher and a young, bruised cook exchanging quiet conversations. Whispers reached ears faster than the wind. Some townsfolk laughed at what they thought were trivial interactions, others scowled, jealousy and suspicion stirring in equal measure. Clara, though hesitant, found courage in Tobias's unwavering presence. For the first time, she felt the weight of the town's judgment lessen under the strength of his silent support. A storm rolled in one evening, fierce and sudden. Clara struggled to secure pots and pans as rain lashed against the windows. Tobias arrived, drenched but determined, helping her stabilize the kitchen and moving heavy supplies out of harm's way. The wind howled, yet inside, a warmth spread between them, a mixture of respect, gratitude, and the unspoken recognition of shared struggle. Clara realized survival on the frontier was no longer solitary. Night fell, and the ranch hands slept under the roof, oblivious to the tension that simmered in the kitchen. Clara and Tobias sat across from one another, the flickering lantern light casting long shadows. "Tell me," Tobias said quietly, "who hurt you?" Clara hesitated, fear and shame gripping her. But the intensity in his gaze urged honesty. Slowly, she recounted the bruises, the unwanted remarks, and the subtle violence of those who assumed her weakness. Tobias listened, his jaw tight, anger restrained only by reason. The next morning, Tobias made his presence felt across the town. He spoke to the foreman, the storekeepers, even the mayor, commanding respect without raising his voice. His actions were deliberate and visible. No one ignored his concern for Clara. The town felt the shift. The giant rancher was no longer just a figure of labor and wealth, but a shield for those who needed protection. Clara observed quietly, awe and relief mixing in her chest, as subtle power reshaped the dynamics around her. Despite the protection Tobias offered, Clara remained cautious. She understood the fragility of trust, the ease with which appearances could deceive. Yet, seeing Tobias gently tend to injured animals, offer food to children, and protect the weak slowly chipped away at her skepticism. His strength was formidable, but it was tempered with care, revealing a depth rarely acknowledged in frontier men. Each act confirmed that her life in his proximity could feel safer than any she had known. One evening, a confrontation erupted at the market. A man who had harassed Clara dared to cross paths with her. Tobias intervened swiftly, his massive frame towering over the man, voice booming yet controlled. The onlookers fell silent, witnessing the righteous authority of a man unwilling to tolerate cruelty. Clara felt a mixture of fear, awe, and relief. The town watched, some in admiration, others in quiet resentment, as Tobias silently reclaimed justice for someone who had always been overlooked. The following days were quieter but no less significant. Tobias and Clara worked side by side in the ranch's kitchens and fields, sharing long silences filled with understanding rather than words. Small gestures, a cloth draped over her shoulders, a shared smile, a basket of fruit, wove invisible threads of connection. Clara began to recognize that strength and compassion were not opposites. Tobias embodied both. The bruises on her arms became symbols not of weakness, but of endurance, resilience, and the beginning of a bond that might withstand any storm. By the end of the week, Clara had gained more than just employment. She had a mentor, a protector, and slowly, an unexpected friend. Tobias's presence, once intimidating, had become a pillar of safety, guiding her through the complexities of frontier life. The town, ever watchful, began to shift in response to their quiet partnership. Whispers transformed into respect, skepticism softened into acknowledgement. Clara felt a cautious hope that perhaps happiness was possible, even in the rugged landscape she now called home. As night draped its velvet cloak over the town, Clara sat by the fireplace, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Tobias was nearby, repairing tools with focused attention. The silence between them was comfortable, yet charged with unspoken understanding. Clara allowed herself a rare smile, the weight of fear and isolation easing. She knew the road ahead would hold challenges, but for the first time, she felt she wasn't walking it alone. Hope, fragile yet real, had begun to grow in her heart. The morning after the confrontation, Clara awoke to quiet, the ranch bathed in soft sunlight. Her bruises throbbed slightly, reminders of vulnerability, yet she felt safer knowing Tobias's watchful presence was near. She prepared breakfast for the ranch hands, her hands steady but heart racing, aware that trust had begun to weave itself between them. Each glance from Tobias conveyed reassurance, a silent promise that she was no longer alone in facing the harshness of frontier life. Rumors of Tobias's protection spread through the town. Like wildfire, some were impressed, others resentful, but the whisperings didn't faze Clara. For the first time, she experienced the freedom of working without constant fear. Tobias's large shadow and commanding presence had shifted the town's dynamics. People began to think twice before causing harm, their bravado muted by the quiet authority of a man unwilling to let injustice prevail. One afternoon, a traveling trader arrived, claiming debts owed and threatening the town with force. Tobias immediately confronted him, his towering frame and intense gaze intimidating the man before words were even spoken. Clara watched from the kitchen window, heart pounding, realizing that Tobias's strength extended beyond physical might. It carried justice, wisdom, and protective vigilance that no town ordinance could match. That night, the trader returned with a small band of troublemakers, attempting to harass Clara and the townsfolk. Tobias was ready. Clara joined, carrying buckets of water and candles to illuminate the confrontation. Together, they defended the town, her fear replaced by adrenaline and trust. Tobias's strategies, combined with her quick thinking, foiled the aggressors. Clara realized that courage was no longer just enduring hardships, it was acting alongside someone who inspired her strength. By dawn, the traders fled, leaving the town shaken but unharmed. Tobias stood beside Clara, checking her for injuries, his eyes soft with concern. She smiled faintly, the first time in weeks she felt a true sense of relief. The town's perception of her had changed too. She was no longer just the timid cook, but a partner in resilience and courage. The shared ordeal had cemented a bond between her and Tobias that even the whispers of the town could not diminish. Days passed, and small gestures from Tobias, extra firewood, fresh milk, herbs for the kitchen, strengthened the growing connection. Clara found herself anticipating these acts, her heart warming at the unspoken care. Tobias, though rarely verbal about feelings, demonstrated his affection in actions that mattered more than words. The townsfolk noticed, some with approval, some with envy, but Clara paid little attention. She had discovered that trust and love often grew silently, nourished by deeds rather than declarations. One late afternoon, Tobias invited Clara to sit by the corral. The horizon glowed with a golden hue as he spoke softly, "You've changed this place in ways you may never know." Clara's chest tightened, a flutter of emotions she could not name. The frontier, once an intimidating expanse, now felt like a canvas for hope. In Tobias's steady gaze, she found acknowledgement, respect, and perhaps the beginnings of a love she hadn't dared imagine. A letter arrived from her family in the city, news of a pressing emergency. Clara wrestled with her choices: return to the familiar or remain in the frontier, in the unpredictable world she had grown to love. Tobias observed her silently, understanding her inner turmoil. He offered no pressure, only his presence, allowing her to weigh her heart's desire. Clara realized that love, true love, thrived in freedom and trust, not obligation or fear. The night before she was to depart, Clara wandered to the barn. Tobias was there, tending to horses, his massive form softened by the lantern light. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, words became unnecessary. She reached out, and he took her hand without hesitation. The bond they had forged, through hardship, courage, and shared moments, had grown into something undeniable. Neither wanted to let it slip away. Morning came, and Clara prepared her few belongings. Tobias approached, holding a small pouch of herbs and spices he had sewn himself. "For your cooking," he said, voice low but warm. Tears prickled Clara's eyes, moved by his thoughtfulness and steady care. The frontier had been harsh, yet moments like this revealed tenderness hidden beneath strength, proof that the man she trusted could also love deeply. As Clara was about to step toward the stagecoach, Tobias stopped her. "This place, and I, aren't the same without you," he said quietly. Clara's heart skipped. She realized that home was no longer a distant city or her past. It was here, beside the man who had taught her courage, shown her care, and shared in her trials. A smile broke across her face, tears of relief and joy mingling. She had found belonging, love, and safety in one place. Clara stayed. The town watched, astonished, as the timid cook became the woman who had endured and thrived, hand in hand with the giant rancher. Life was still rugged, work demanding, yet the burden felt lighter shared. Tobias's fierce presence blended seamlessly with his care for Clara, creating a new rhythm in the frontier, a life defined not just by survival, but by love and trust. Weeks turned into months. Clara's cooking became a town staple, her confidence growing alongside Tobias's quiet warmth. They worked together, laughed together, and faced hardships side by side. The townsfolk grew to admire their partnership, recognizing strength in unity. Tobias, once feared for his size and temperament, revealed layers of loyalty, humor, and gentleness. Clara's life, once shadowed by fear and bruises, now flourished under their shared courage and mutual respect. One golden afternoon, the wind carrying the scent of wildflowers, Tobias finally spoke the words Clara had longed to hear. "Stay, not just as a worker, but as mine." Clara laughed, tears sparkling in her eyes, and nodded. Their hands intertwined, hearts steady, with the frontier stretching endlessly around them, a land of challenges, yet also of love, trust, and a happiness neither had dared imagine. The town, once whispering of bruises and fear, now witnessed a bond unbreakable and true.